Yes, thanks for staying with us on the South Australian Sports Channel. Now, Poppy, you've worked with this man. I don't mind saying 36 years in radio, 32 in TV.
Wow.
It's hard to believe looking at him, but he's spent that much time. Of course, we talk about Mark Aiston. Mark, thanks for dropping in.
Mate, pleasure. How are you guys?
Very good, mate. Now, we've been having quite a good laugh off air.
I worked for him.
Oh, did you work for him?
About 10 or 15 years on the road, he'd just go like this: Poppy, I need a story. Poppy, write a script. Poppy, need vision. Poppy, get me a coffee.
Good bloke to work for or not?
Yeah, good bloke. Yeah, very funny.
I'll tell you what, we learned a lot about each other, didn't we?
There was one story, and I'll expand maybe during the commercial break, but we had one of the funniest moments in my life was actually in a booth where we do some editing, and it wasn't to do with the actual edit.
Can we tell that
No,
story?
I don't think so.
Okay, but we should say it had nothing to do with...
television whatsoever.
Oh, that's right.
Is that relevant at all that you're in a TV studio and had nothing to do with TV?
It was just a very funny moment. I'll have to tell it one day.
No, we can't tell it on here.
I'll tell you one of the funny things, though, that you learn is that when I first started working with Rob, keen, wanted to be the best reporter in town, but after a while you realise that not everything was honky-dory in one's life.
About 2 weeks.
Yeah, it took us about 2 weeks. And Rob would come in and he'd be in a really bad mood, and I'd say something that would be edgy, and he'd say, "Not today, mate." Not today. Not today. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there were the times. It's actually it's an interesting place, the
Dynamic,
newsroom.
yeah,
Yeah, it is, because you've got a lot of personalities and they're all fairly driven to get the story. Mark was one of them.
Egos,
a few egos in there, and there were some moments where,
So the egos clashed.
Well, the egos clashed, but we didn't have too many fist fights.
Not fist fight. How long had you been carrying a knife?
Not that long.
just after you had the gun, really. Let me ask you, Mark, horse racing or greyhound racing, calling for you. How did you find that?
Look, I really loved it. I actually started doing that in 1980, and Ray Fewings was a great mentor of mine, and so was Bruce McAvaney, and also Ron Paps. My problem back then was that I was not focused. What was I, 23, 24 years of age? Bruce was totally focused. All he wanted to do was be the best at what he wanted to do. So did I.
But where did he end up, really?
Exactly. He sort of struggled a bit, didn't he? But from my point of view, I never put the work in. And I can remember Ray Fewings pulling me aside and telling me off really significantly at Victoria Park one day, turning the mic off, as in turning the line off back to then it was 5DN. So the people back at 5DN wouldn't hear what was being said in the booth. And he looked at me and he said, "You're wasting your life." He said, "You've got to start concentrating. You've got to live and breathe this sport if you want to be the best." And I didn't. And as a result, I only lasted 2.5 years. But I loved calling. I loved it, but I just didn't have the commitment to do it consistently well.
And I think sometimes you only realise that in reflection of the moments that you've lost, don't you? When you reflect back. And you're one of those, Smythe, that didn't want to let a moment pass by without making the most of it.
Yep.
Whereas Mark and probably me too, well, not Mark and probably Mark and me.
Well,
you sometimes get caught up.
We're a bit similar.
Yeah.
A bit similar in that way. I think, and also too, I had a couple of nasty experiences in the early stages. I called some good races initially, particularly trots.
Yes.
I can remember my very first one at Cadena. I was as nervous as anything, but it went okay. But I was shockingly nervous. But Bruce didn't seem to be. Ray didn't seem to be nervous. Ron Paps didn't seem to have a nervous, fibre in his body. But I'll never forget the day at Gawler. And it was a 1,600 metre race. They were right across the other side. I'd brought my binoculars. I should have used Ray's because mine weren't as good. And halfway, or not halfway, 100, 200 metres into the race, I lost concentration. Ray picked it up, and this is true. This is a true story. Ray picked it up. He came straight up into the box. He stood alongside of me, and as I was sort of saying, with about 1,600 metres left to go, and the leader is, he'd go, he'd say what the name of the horse was. So I would say the horse. Yeah. Then he'd tell me who was second. We did this. It's probably never been done before. We did this for the whole race.
Wow.
Now, how do you think I felt?
Yeah.
I was devastated, Rob.
Yeah.
And Phil, I include you in this story as well because you're
No, I don't care if you're devastated, mate.
But I was devastated. Absolutely, and it ruined my confidence. And I kept calling for another 18 months or so, did quite well, made a few mistakes here and there. But now I can say I didn't put 100% into it. And if I had that time again, sorry, Rob, I'd put 100% into it.
And I think this is, and I think part of this is that following a successful media career, radio and television for Mark, is that he realises the good, the bad, what's required, what should be done.
Good point.
Now, as far as mentoring goes, because that's a big part of what you do now.
Well, it is, and I guess I can mentor. media train's probably a better word.
Yeah.
And then there's mentoring within it because, but I guess I can say things from the heart about how to be the best. Because I know what it takes to be the best in certain areas, but I also know what road you can travel on when you don't do your best and what result that gets. Which, I mean,
that makes sense.
Of course, and you're in the same boat, Phil.
Yeah,
I mean, you're a high achiever. You want to be a high achiever as well, so you guys know what it takes to be the best. Whether we always do it or not is another matter.
I mean, experience is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And you said if you had your time again, you'd do it differently. So now you're passing that knowledge on through your media inside a company. I want to ask you this because it's happened just recently to Will Crouch with Channel 9.
Yeah.
Athletes behaving poorly or people around them behaving poorly. For you, in your journey through sport, were there a couple of athletes you thought were well out of line?
Oh, look, well, I mean, obviously Nick Kyrgios right now is well out of line, and you would have had a lot of experiences with athletes not behaving as well as they could have when you were going.
Well, it was funny, when I started off, Michael Clark to me was an obvious person I just had really no time for. And, you know, it's funny when you look at his career.
Why was that, Rob?
I just thought his arrogance was really just, I didn't really want to waste any time with him. And now in reflection, I sort of, it's probably sounds a bit nasty, but I get some satisfaction in the way he's seen by former teammates in the light he is, because I saw it.
You saw it early?
Well, I saw it within his first test.
That's interesting.
At Adelaide Oval, and it was just, I just thought, wow, this kid's way ahead of himself.
Well, going back 20 years, I had a similar experience with Alan Border. In fact, I think most did. Most did. So when Alan would come here for a test match or a one-dayer, he was prickly. He was a little bit like the Mick Malthouse of footy, of cricket sort of thing. And you'd make the fatal mistake of asking him about the opposition and their bowling, and he'd say, I'm not interested, and he'd say, I'm not interested in talking about these guys. I'm interested in questions about us. And it was quite aggressive, so I never ever felt comfortable interviewing Alan. But getting back to your point, I think Nick Kyrgios is a good example of someone at the moment who's not doing the right thing by us. Now, I don't know whether he cares. I get the distinct impression that he doesn't want advice. He wants to do what he wants to do. He's made a lot of money. He's probably making, I know that the young kids like him, he's probably making a lot of money through sponsors like Shane Warne did, similar situation, bit of a bad boy. He's probably thinking, hey, you can write all you like about me, but this is what I am. This is it. I don't necessarily like what he does, but you know what? I'm going to go and watch him in January. I'm going to go and watch him in January when he's
different.
Well, exactly.
Let me ask you, Thin, who have been some of the better people you've had to interview over the journey?
Well, I had a great relationship with, and it was only once, with John McEnroe. Now, the reason I mention him is this: he could have intimidated me, and I guess initially he did. It was his first interview ever. Sorry, it was his first interview after he'd been suspended at the Australian Open. So he was in Adelaide that next year. And you might have been at Channel 10 at the time, maybe, Rob. And he was going to play, of course, in the international here in Adelaide. So he was hitting with Darren Cale down at Memorial Drive. And in fact, it was Darren that told me that he was going to be there. But Darren said, mate, good luck with an interview. So I stood on the sidelines and waited and waited and waited and waited. Finally, he finished. And like a little meek, mild sort of individual, I walked over. Oh, hi, John, it's Mark Aiston from Channel 10, I think it was 10 then. Yes, Mark, what can I do for you? And I said, can I just ask you a little bit about the fact that this is the first time you're back in Australia after your suspension? He looked at me and he said, one question. Okay, all right, thank you. Asked him the one question, then he opened up. I got 3 or 4, as you know, Rob, you get excited when this happens. I got 3 or 4 great grabs. He shook my hand at the end and said, well done, thank you, mate. And it was all done and dusted. Now, I know I didn't have a long relationship with him. I met him once. That's it. But to me, he was. It was an impact. He made an impact, but he also didn't put me down. And for someone like John, who is extremely egotistical, I think I got out of it lightly.
Well done. Good on you.
Well, mate, we could sit here and chat for hours.
We have to come back again.
Yeah, sure.
Tell me some more stories.
What about later today?
Oh, I'm busy today.
Time for us to take a break. Mark, thanks for your time. Always great to catch up. Stay with us. Still plenty to come.